So this is part 2 of handling cash transactions in YNAB. And in the first video, I talked a lot about getting money from the ATM, getting refunds, splitting transactions at the grocery store. And in this video, I really want to show you how you account for spending money in YNAB with cash. Okay, because it's very different when you're using your ATM card or writing checks. And I want to go over this because people do get confused about this as well. And I just want to let you know, don't expect any more fancy PowerPoint graphics. And you're probably going to hear some ums and ahs and ends and your nose, because trying to make it perfect was keeping me from giving you the information that I think can be helpful to you. So this is just the information in as succinct a way as I can handle it going stream of consciousness. So I hope you'll bear with me. Now, let's take an example to start with. My Aunt Lucille, who is a fictional character, gave me $200 in cash for my birthday. She didn't want to give me a check. She just handed me $200 in 20s. And I decided, great, well, I'm just going to keep this as cash in my house. Now, if I had deposited the money into my checking account, then I would account for this transaction in my checking account in YNAB. But since she gave me cash and I'm bringing it to my bank of cash, which is, as you all know if you watched the other video, my little black box where I stick my cash money, that is where I'm going to have to account for it out of my cash account in YNAB. So you have accounts for your checking, savings, etc., and you have an account for cash. So let's go ahead and add the transaction. So we'll just assume it's today's date. And usually the payee is who receives the money. But in this case, whenever I get cash from somebody, I always put the payee's name as whoever gave it to me. It's just easier for me to then know where I got it. So I'm going to type Aunt Lucille. And this is where it gets interesting. If I want to take that $200 and allocate maybe 10 here, 20 there, 30 there, to all different categories, I would simply put it in the category of inflow to be budgeted. And I'm going to show you how that would work. So let's put the $200 in and save it. And here's the transaction. Whoops. That wasn't the transaction. Here's the transaction. Forget that one. That was my mistake. Here's Aunt Lucille's gift of $200 as an inflow, and in the category I picked was to be budgeted. Let's go to there. See, let's go to there. Now, normally I would cut that out because I'm embarrassed, but we have to move forward. So you can see that to be budgeted has $200 available. And I can go ahead and I could take $50 for clothing, $40 for house supplies, and notice that how much is available to be budgeted is reduced with each amount I enter into the budgeted field. But let's say I don't want to do this. Let's say, see, once I get rid of it, you can see to be budgeted $200. Let's say I want it all to go for clothing. In that case, all I have to do is pick the clothing category. It's very simple. And I can save it again. And when I go back to the budget side, there's $0 to be budgeted. But notice that $200 is in the activity for clothing. And that means there's $200 available. If you click the activity, you'll see cash from Aunt Lucille. Granted, it is true, we do have a memo field, but I really like to put the payee as whoever or wherever I got the money from. Okay, so now I'm happy I have all this money for clothes, but some time passes. And I realize, I really need a little more money for my furniture. I don't want to take all the money from the clothing, but I do want to take some of it for furniture. And I haven't used anything yet for clothing. So there's still $200 available. YNAB assumes you want to move all of it, but if you don't, just type over it. So let's say I want to take half of it and move it to furniture. I'll just type 100, and I click the drop down and find the furniture category, pick it, and click OK. And now $100 was moved, and there's $500 available in furniture. It's that easy. You can, of course, always change it in the transaction like we did before, but often it's easier for people to just do it between their categories by using the budget side and picking the category, the amount available, and moving it, so they don't have to go look all over the place for the transaction. Okay, so that's one example when you get money in and how you can allocate the money. But now I want to go spend that money. All right? So I go to the clothing store and I spend $60 on a blouse at Kohl's. Okay, I go to Kohl's, and no, Kohl's would never have a $60 blouse. What am I saying? That's insane. I spend $22.50 on a blouse at Kohl's, okay, and I have to account for that. Well, since I used cash, I'm just going to make a transaction in this cash account. So let's go ahead and do it. Add the transaction. We'll just keep today's date. The payee now is the clothing store Kohl's. The category I'm taking it from is clothing. And now it's an outflow because I'm spending it. And I spent $22.50. And if I want to put something in the memo like blouse, I could put anything in the memo, but you don't have to use the memo, but you can. And I'm going to save it. It's really that simple. So now we can see that I spent the money at Kohl's. Let me go over split transactions again because I have a chance to right now when it comes to cash. So now I go to the grocery store and I buy food, but I also buy some paper towels. And I like to track my house supplies separate from my food. Okay? So I spend $30 on food and $10 on house supplies. How am I going to track that and split that transaction? Well, let's add a transaction. Current date. My grocery store is Publix, so you can see that YNAB auto-memorizes payee names so that it's easier. When you just start typing them, they show up. And now I need to make this a split. And notice that more payee category, these showed up. And the outflow totally, the total outflow was $40. Part of it was spent on food. I spent $30. And part of it was spent on house supplies, which was, I'll make a note, paper towels. And that's $10. And I'm going to save it. It's really cool because YNAB shows you all the lines for the split. So you see the total, which was the 40. Well, that didn't help. I thought that would just highlight the top line. You see the total, which is the 40, and then you see the breakout of 30 and 10. Now, I didn't need to put a payee because I split this transaction, a single transaction at the grocery store, into two parts. But it was one overall transaction of $40. And we've talked about this before. The only time you would use the payee is if you did a transfer. But right now, it's fine for us to leave the payee blank in the sub transactions because together they make up the total here and we see who the payee is here. Now, let's go to the budget side and we can see we spent $30 on food and we spent $10 on paper towels. And that's really how simple it is to put a transaction in the cash account. I think where the confusion comes has to do with when people get money back when they've initially bought an item using their ATM card and the cash back is in cash. But just remember, you need to account for the transaction based on what type of transaction it is. So if the store clerk gives you a refund of cash, that transaction comes into your cash account as an inflow. If the store clerk gives you a refund back on your debit card, that comes into your checking account as an inflow into your checking account. And just to reiterate one more time, if you get money from the ATM, you would track that as a transfer from your checking account to your cash account. To get more details so you can see it and not just hear me telling you, go watch video 1 where I talk about how to do all those things in YNAB. So I want to go over one last thing, and that's reconciling in your cash account. I'm going to do a separate video about reconciling your checking account. But as far as cash, there's a few things that are slightly different, so I'm just going to show you here, all right? The first thing I always do is make sure my filter is going to show me reconciled transactions, and you'll understand why in a minute. And I click OK after I selected it. Now, over here, the C, and here they've got a great definition. Marking a transaction cleared means it has posted to your bank account. In other words, with a checking account, if I write a check for $300, when I go to my bank account online and I see that that transaction has been cleared in the bank of $300, I can then reconcile it and clear it in YNAB. In this case, there is no bank except, in my case, my little black box, or it might be your wallet. So that's what we call the bank of cash. Generally, the best practice is to clear or click the gray C to make it green as soon as you enter the transaction. Why? Because you are essentially the banker at the bank of cash, and you know this transaction has cleared because you made the transaction. You received $200 from Aunt Lucille. You know it happened. You don't have to go wait for some outside entity to let you know that that's happened. You can click the green C. So you can see that I have not cleared the other transactions, and I should have, so bad on me. So let's just go ahead. We know all these transactions have happened, and you'll notice it's popping in different orders, and that's because I have this sorted by cleared. So if I don't do that and I do it the other way, then what isn't cleared shows up on the bottom. If I click it again, what isn't cleared shows up on the top. I happen to like sorting things that way in my checking account because it makes it easier for me. It's probably not necessary in your cash account because, like I said, you're the banker. So you could do it by date. And if you click the date, when I click the date this time, notice the most current date is the top. I could also put the most current date at the bottom. So when I do it by date, it's in the middle there, and I'm just going to click it. So now everything has cleared. Okay? That is part 1 of reconciling. You know that you've done all these transactions. However, you really need to count the cash that you have left to be sure the amount that YNAB says is your cleared balance is really how much cash you have. In my case, that is rarely the case. I always lose money. I don't know what happens. That little black box has a hole in it or something. I don't know. I'm always losing money. But what you would do is gather up all your change and your bills and literally count it up, and then you would reconcile. Now, let's go ahead and do this. So according to this, in YNAB, I have nothing that hasn't cleared my bank of cash. So YNAB says I have a cleared balance. The working balance, as you can see, is the cleared balance plus what hasn't cleared. So watch, if I unclick this C, my working balance is $240. Because YNAB says, well, $75 of this money, you haven't said that it's cleared the account. And again, since it's cash, I am the bank. So I'm going to go ahead and clear it. Now we're going to go reconcile. Let's say I count up all my cash and I only have $230. But YNAB says I have $240. What do I do? Well, first of all, I click no because it's not the current balance that I have. We have to go with what I have, not with what YNAB says, because I'm holding the cash in my hand. So let's click no. And I'm going to put 230 because that is the amount of cash I have. I click OK. And it's really good that they give you this instruction. Compare each unlocked transaction. Now, let me tell you what that means before we read further. When you reconcile, a little lock shows up next to the transaction. And that means that it has cleared, you've checked it, the balance, the cleared balance in your bank account is the cleared balance in YNAB. And what's great about that is the next time you're going through this process, and again, I'll do this in much more detail in another video with a checking account, when you find a mistake, it'll be really easy to figure out where the mistake is. So stay tuned to that for that video. So compare each unlocked transaction to your account, website, or statement. Well, in this case, we don't have one. We just have us and our stash of money in our hand. So you really can ignore this because if the transaction in YNAB matches, clear it. If it doesn't, make any adjustments. Well, you just have a total amount of cash. So if you can't find the difference, make an adjustment transaction and move on. I'm going to skip this explanation in the future. But before we move on, this is important. If you can't find the difference, make an adjustment transaction and move on. So how could I find the difference? Well, I could look in my wallet again. I could look at the bottom of my purse. I might look in the chair. I might look in my pockets, coat pockets, whatever. That's how you would try to find the $10 that's missing. But it is possible that it's just gone. So make a adjustment transaction and move on is probably the best advice in this case. So we're going to continue. And it says, this account's cleared balance in YNAB is $10 higher than your actual account. Yes, I know that. So I'm going to create an adjustment and finished. Now, not time for a dance yet. So I'm going to show you the transaction that was automatically created. Reconciliation balance adjustment. They pick the category automatically as inflow to be budgeted. And in the memo, they say entered automatically by YNAB, and they subtracted $10. Well, that's not a really good idea because if you go to your budget side, now you can see you have negative $10 to be budgeted, and you'll have to subtract it out of here. I prefer to keep it clean and do it in the transaction, and I'll show you. It's very simple. If I know there's going to be a negative, or actually if I know there's going to be positive or negative, let's say I have more, and that has happened once in a while, I'm just going to change the category. I actually have a lost and found category, but I just messed up because it's not funded. But I think you're going to understand the point. So I'm going to select my lost and found category, and then I'm going to save. Well, the problem is it should have been funded. So this sort of screws up what I'm trying to show you, but let's fix that. I'm actually going to move $25 from my food category to my lost and found category. So I apologize. That should have been done before, but I really didn't want to start the video over again. I like to have a small balance in this category called lost and found, and this is exactly its purpose. When I count up my cash, like I said, it's never right. It's not usually as much as $10 off, but it has been like more than that off occasionally. And this way, I don't have to think about where am I going to get the money from, just like you saw me have to, I guess I'll take it out of food. If I keep this funded with about $20, $25 in it, then when I count up my money at least once a month, and I recommend more often than that, twice a month at first anyway, and if you use cash a lot, I would do it weekly. Then if there is an error, it's really easy to just take it out of this lost and found category. That's really all there is to cash transactions. So let me just review. When you get cash in and you're keeping it as cash, put it into the cash account as an inflow transaction. Pick either inflow to be budgeted. You can also split the transaction and spread it among a number of categories, or you can pick one category. If later down the road you decide you want to move money in the cash account from one category to another, just go to the budget side. Let me just go over here just so you can see the budget side, and click on the available amount in any category you want to move from, and select what category you want to move to. Then let's go back to the cash account again. As far as reconciling your cash account, always click the little C next to the transaction to make it green as soon as you enter the transaction. And then when you click the reconcile button, make sure you've counted up all your cash, and then you can go ahead and either say yes, the cleared balance is the same as the amount you have, or no, it isn't. Go ahead and let YNAB make an adjustment transaction if you can't find the money, and then change that category to lost and found, which hopefully you have filled with $20, $25, so that when there is a disparity, it's an easy fix to just take the money from that category. I hope you found this video helpful.